So everything's good with Iran now?
No, don't be absurd.
Constituents.
Don't
Well,
be
I'm asking, the overall cost of living is lower today than it was 16 months ago when you came into office, because what I'm hearing from my constituents is that the cost of groceries are up. For example, beef, coffee, tomatoes are at record or near record highs. The cost of housing is up.
I am
and for
saying
too many
that
of
we are much closer to the Fed's target rate of 2% on core inflation than we were when President Trump came into office. We are at 2.8%, and you can list off the most expensive groceries or that have had the biggest price increases.
I think you're just out of touch with what American families are facing. Mr. Secretary, simple question. Do you believe that there should be only one legal system in this country and that no one, even the president, should be above the law? I can tell you that my constituents are outraged by the agreement the president made with himself and his own Justice Department that excluded him from ever having an audit over his taxes. No one should be targeted. No one should be targeted by the administration. Whoever is in the White House.
Is the Iran conflict really over? Are American families actually better off? And should the president receive special treatment from the IRS? Representative Brad Schneider put Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on the spot with all three questions, and their exchange became increasingly heated.
Iran had ended. Do you truly believe that we are no longer in conflict with Iran and that they are no longer a threat to Israel or allies in the Gulf, that their nuclear program has been destroyed, that they no longer have a ballistic missile program and drone program threatening its neighbors in the region, and that they will no longer sponsor terrorism in the region and around the world?
So are you saying you're in agreement with the president's decision to the...
You said the conflict was over. I'm asking, do you believe the conflict's over and everything's copacetic?
The conflict is on pause.
So everything's good with Iran now?
No, don't be absurd.
I'm asking you to
clarify.
Absurd.
That as the president said yesterday, unless an American life is lost, he does not believe that he will have to restart the kinetic acid.
Okay, so I'm reclaiming my time, and I'm just trying to help you clear the record. I'm reclaiming my time, Mr. Secretary. Can you promise, because this is your jurisdiction, that you and the Trump administration are not considering lifting sanctions on Iran as a concession towards opening the Straits of Hormuz?
We've made it clear that the Straits of Hormuz, the blockade, is the only thing that will be lifted to reopen the Straits.
So no sanctions relief whatsoever?
I'm not part of the negotiating team, but I am told by the negotiating team, and I strongly believe that the blockade will be lifted.
Okay, and I'm just going to reclaim because there's a lot of things I want to cover. My hope is you'll keep Congress informed of any such considerations if they do come up. Also in your opening remarks, Mr. Secretary, you said Americans have more money in their pockets. That's not what I'm hearing from my constituents. Are you saying the overall cost of living is lower today than it was 16 months ago when you came into office? Because what I'm hearing from my constituents is that the cost of groceries are up. For example, beef, coffee, tomatoes are at record or near record highs. The cost of housing is up. And for too many, the American dream of buying a home is out of reach. I'll let you answer. Healthcare premiums continue to rise, and millions of Americans have either already lost or expect to lose their health insurance altogether because of H.R. 1, the bill you so joyously celebrate. Energy costs, gas for our cars, electricity for our homes are all rising through the roof. And family care, child care, and elder care is prohibitively costly. Are you saying that cost of living is lower today than it was a year ago?
No, I am saying that we are much closer to the Fed's target rate of 2% on core inflation than we were when President Trump came into office. We are at 2.8%, and you can list off the most expensive groceries or that have had the biggest price increases.
I think you're just out of touch with what American families are facing.
No.
As my colleague noted, I'm reclaiming my time. Tariffs are a tax on American families. This is my time, Mr. Secretary. This is my time. I will speak and then
2.5%.
Higher grocery prices are taxes on American families. Higher gas and electricity prices are taxes on American
Democrats should know. No wonder so many people are leaving Illinois. Why don't you come see me in South Carolina?
They're not leaving. They're coming along. Just a simple question, Mr. Secretary.
You're saying Illinois doesn't have net outbound migration?
All right, let me take it to a different topic, and I know you don't want to address it, but my constituents are outraged and want me to talk to you about the absurd illegal self-dealing settlement between President Trump and his family with the Justice Department and the IRS over which you have jurisdiction. The administration apparently believes that there should be two systems of justice, two sets of laws, one for the president, his family, and his rich friends like you, and one for the rest of us. Nothing demonstrates this more than the so-called settlement with its slush fund for insurrectionists and tax immunity for the president and his family. Mr. Secretary, simple question. Do you believe that there should be only one legal system in this country and that no one, even the president, should be above the law?
I believe that no one is above the law, but you all have put the president beneath the law, and you have weaponized the system against him, whether it is the leak of his taxpayer records.
His taxes should never be leaked. No taxpayers' information should be leaked. I agree with you on that. But note, let me ask you a separate question.
Would you like to apologize to the president right now on behalf of the...
I have nothing to apologize to this president for. His taxes should not have been leaked, but it was leaked by a contractor. And you keep trying to dissemble here and avoid the questions. Do you believe that all Americans should pay the taxes they owe and not emit a penny more?
100%.
Yes or no? All right. So do you think it applies to the President of the United States, irrespective of whether the President is a Democrat or a Republican?
Yes.
Okay. So we agree on this, and we should have a tax system that is fair, and it should be applied fairly to all people. But I can tell you that my constituents are outraged by the agreement the President made with himself and his own Justice Department that excluded him from ever having an audit over his taxes. No one should be targeted. No one should be targeted by the administration. Whoever is in the White House.
Read the addendum.
No one should be targeted by the administration. Whoever's in the White House, their taxes should be paid, and they should be confident that that information will be kept confidential with the IRS and not used to target them, their families, or their business.
Couldn't agree more.
Several important developments happened after this hearing. Most notably, Schneider pressed Bessent for an assurance that sanctions on Iran would not be lifted as part of negotiations over the Strait of Hormuz. Bessent stopped short of making that absolute promise, saying he was not on the negotiating team. That distinction proved important. On June 22nd, the United States issued a temporary 60-day authorization allowing transactions involving Iranian crude oil and petroleum products as diplomacy continued over the strait and a broader peace arrangement. And the situation changed again after that. The June U.S.-Iran arrangement ultimately broke down, with renewed tensions and attacks around the strait. By August 12th, Reuters reported that efforts to revive the interim agreement had made no meaningful progress. By August 14th, shipping through Hormuz had slowed dramatically amid renewed attacks and U.S. threats of greater economic pressure on Tehran. As of August 17th, the confrontation is still unresolved. Iran has threatened renewed escalation if the United States does not implement what Tehran considers its obligations under the interim arrangement, while Washington and Tehran remain divided over sanctions, the blockade and control of the Strait of Hormuz. That makes Schneider's first line of questioning much more significant in hindsight. Bessent had apparently referred earlier in the hearing to the Iran conflict as having ended. Schneider immediately challenged that characterization. His point was straightforward. Even if major kinetic operations had stopped temporarily, Iran still possessed military capabilities, the Strait of Hormuz remained an enormous strategic issue, and the underlying confrontation had not simply disappeared. Bessent pushed back sharply when Schneider characterized his position as meaning everything was now fine with Iran, telling him not to be absurd. But Schneider then asked the more consequential question, would the administration promise not to provide sanctions relief to Iran in exchange for reopening the strait? Bessent's answer was carefully limited. He said he understood that lifting the blockade was the relevant concession, but acknowledged that he was not part of the negotiating team. What happened weeks later demonstrated exactly why that qualification mattered. The administration eventually did authorize temporary Iranian oil transactions as negotiations progressed. That doesn't mean Bessent lied during the hearing. He explicitly said he was not part of the negotiations, but it shows that Schneider was pressing him on an issue that remained unsettled inside the administration. The exchange then shifted from foreign policy to something much closer to voters' wallets. Schneider challenged Bessent's claim that Americans had more money in their pockets. He pointed to groceries, housing, health insurance, electricity, gasoline, childcare, and elder care, and argued that families in his Illinois district were still experiencing severe affordability pressure. Bessent responded with a different measurement. Rather than saying that prices had returned to previous levels, he argued that the rate of inflation had moved significantly closer to the Federal Reserve's 2% target. That distinction is critical. Lower inflation does not necessarily mean lower prices. If something costs $100 and inflation pushes its price to $110, reducing inflation does not automatically return that product to $100. It means the rate at which the price is increasing has slowed. So Schneider and Bessent were partly arguing about two different measurements. Bessent was emphasizing inflation rates and macroeconomic improvement. Schneider was emphasizing the actual price level experienced by households. And politically, those can produce completely different perceptions of the economy. A government can accurately say inflation is falling while voters can accurately say groceries, housing, or electricity still feel expensive. That explains why their exchange became so heated. Schneider accused Bessent of being out of touch with ordinary families. Bessent responded by attacking Democratic economic policies and then turned the argument toward Illinois, suggesting high costs and Democratic governance were driving people out of the state. But the most legally controversial portion of Schneider's questioning came at the end. He confronted Bessent about the settlement between President Trump, members of Trump's family, and the federal government over the disclosure of Trump's tax information. The underlying lawsuit involved Donald Trump Jr., Eric Trump, and the Trump Organization suing the IRS over disclosure of confidential tax information. The settlement agreement was signed on May 18, 2026. Schneider portrayed the agreement as extraordinary self-dealing because the sitting president's administration was settling litigation involving the president and his own government. He then tried to force Bessent onto common ground. Should everyone obey the same laws? Should everyone pay the taxes they legally owe? Should those principles apply regardless of whether the president is a Republican or Democrat? Bessent answered yes. But Bessent also made an important counterargument. He emphasized that Trump's confidential tax information should never have been leaked in the first place and argued that no taxpayer, president or otherwise, should have private tax information improperly disclosed or used against them. Schneider actually agreed with that principle. And that is an important part of the exchange because the two men were not really arguing about whether unauthorized disclosure of tax records is acceptable. They agreed that it isn't. Their disagreement was over what remedy was appropriate and whether the settlement itself provided Trump and his family extraordinary treatment. The settlement had already generated substantial controversy before Schneider questioned Bessent. DOJ announced the agreement on May 18th, including a proposed $1.8 billion compensation mechanism, while subsequent settlement provisions address claims involving Trump and his affiliates. Critics argued that the arrangement created an unprecedented conflict because the president effectively controlled the executive branch agencies defending litigation brought by himself and his family. Supporters could make a different argument. Trump was still entitled to seek legal remedies for an alleged violation of taxpayer confidentiality, and being president should not automatically eliminate rights that another taxpayer would possess. That is the central legal and ethical tension. A president should not be above the law, but a president should not be below the law either. That was essentially Bessent's defense. Schneider's response was that equal treatment also means the president should not be able to obtain special protections unavailable to ordinary taxpayers. And there was another important development after the June 4th hearing. In July 2026, the federal court sharply criticized conduct surrounding the Trump IRS litigation, finding that the plaintiffs had acted in bad faith in connection with the proceedings. That added another layer of controversy to an agreement that was already facing scrutiny over its structure and potential protections for Trump and his family. So this confrontation aged in an interesting way because all three subjects Schneider raised remained unresolved after Bessent left the hearing room. The Iran conflict did not simply disappear. The administration subsequently offered temporary sanctions relief connected with diplomacy, while the broader arrangement later deteriorated and tensions returned around Hormuz. The affordability debate continued because lower inflation does not automatically erase the higher price levels accumulated during previous years. And the Trump IRS settlement continued attracting legal and political scrutiny after Schneider challenged Bessent about it. That's why the most revealing moment may actually be the point where Schneider and Bessent agreed. No taxpayer's confidential information should be illegally disclosed. Everyone should pay the taxes they legally owe. And nobody, including a president, should be above the law. The real disagreement is about what those principles mean when the president himself is simultaneously the plaintiff in litigation against agencies controlled by his own executive branch. That leaves three major questions from this hearing. Was the temporary easing of Iran sanctions a necessary diplomatic tool to reduce the danger of a larger war, or did it give Tehran leverage without resolving the Strait of Hormuz crisis? When inflation slows but families are still paying historically elevated prices, should Americans judge the economy by the inflation rate or by what actually comes out of their bank accounts every month? And finally, the biggest constitutional and ethical question. When a sitting president has a legitimate legal claim against his own government, how should that case be resolved without either denying him the same rights as every other American or giving him advantages that no ordinary American could ever receive?